Three deals from a B2B podcast that made $2 million in recurring revenue. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Last time you all joined us here, we talked about where you should play and what you should do when it comes to showing up in the podcast ecosystem in 2026, which stages you should be on, how to tell your story, why some rooms aren't worth your time yet. Today, we're going to go deeper. And we're going to go deeper, especially from the perspective of how to make money with your podcast, how you attract the right people for your guests, and how do you attract the right people to your audience? How do you make this something that people actually remember and trust that leads to a lucrative outcome for you and your company's podcast? So let's talk about how the paid click you have is already gone. Most B2B companies are burning money on Google ads, email marketing, all sorts of large scale, generally automated advertising. We are not immune to it. We've put some budget into getting this webinar out in the world. Annette, who's in the audience here, has done a fabulous job of getting a lot of you here. That is great until it feels like you're not getting traction with your ideal customer. So what happens when the things that are automated advertising start to maybe not produce what you want anymore? Let's look at Google AdWords. We're going to use a home services business as an example, since I just had a guy out to fix my furnace. Some keywords in home services are running about $26 a click. I'm from Wisconsin. That is a lot of money for a click on a website for me. That's a Midwestern sensibility that I have. You can capture a lead with that, but $26 to have somebody land on your website. Do you even know that person? I guess is the question. You might be able to guess a few things. You might be able to say, okay, they're, in this metro area, or I'm guessing they're a homeowner if they have a furnace. For an HVAC and a plumbing business, that might work absolutely great. But here's the thing. They don't necessarily run on big time relationship sales. Their work is transactional. And I'm not saying you can't have a great relationship with your plumber or your electrician, but sometimes you just need stuff fixed. What if you're going to have a long-term relationship, though, with somebody who's a supplier or something like a CRM for your business? And maybe that product is, a software or a suite of services, maybe marketing for your business. Folks don't just do 5 minutes of research on that and say, yep, I picked that one. They need to get to know you. And normal paid advertising really doesn't do that depth well. There's nothing wrong with it for the shallower stuff, and it works very well for that. But when you want to go deeper, that's where we want to take a look for podcasts. And here's why I say that. The average time someone spends on a website searching for a product or service is about 54 seconds. And of that 54 seconds, the first 10 to 20 seconds is spent deciding if they're even going to stay on the website. They're either going to find it and what they want and stick around for a bit, or they're just going to bounce and leave. Really fun fact for this to show how when podcasting is involved, things get a little bit more in depth. The average page visitor for this very webinar, that's all of you, spent almost 7 minutes on our landing page for this event. Now, why? Well, because you're looking for something deeper than just that one word or one click answer to how to build your business or pipeline using a podcast. To some extent, in that time on the webpage, you extended me some of that trust, and that's hard to earn, and I thank you for it. Now, podcasting is a tool that when you sit down with somebody, that 7 minutes I was talking about, you can have 5 to 6 times that amount of time with someone to build a relationship and trust with them one-on-one. And that's why it's such a powerful sales tool and can generate crazy amounts of ROI. We're going to look at a real life example of a show that I worked with who used a podcast to get conversations with people they had never had the opportunity to chat with before with their traditional sales emails, sales calls, things along those lines. So we're going to look at that ROI for a moment. And Kate, would you be so kind as to pop up that poll question for everybody here? We're going to play a little thing in Zoom here. B2B podcasts work best as a sales tool for a product or service with what price point? $1,000 a year, 10,000, 30,000, or 50? Get those answers in. See if we can get some folks thinking, okay, I've got First person took a stab there. Appreciate you for being the first one out there. Okay, gotcha. All over the place. Little bit of a split here. I'm going to give this about 10 or 15 more seconds as we got about a dozen folks in here. All right, let's all right, pretty even split here. Let's end that little guy, Kate. Being great, and share those results with everybody. Thank you. All right, so taking a look at this, the answer that I found is actually D. So kudos to whoever got that one. That doesn't make the rest of you wrong necessarily in this case, but what we found is that these higher ticket items are really something that's incredibly valuable in this case. And so let's look at how that goes forward with designing a show, or if you have a show, making it fit with people who may be able to bring you that kind of ROI. So the next thing we're going to talk about is that your show's title, I am one slide behind, sorry about that. Your show's title, format, and focus are going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting to target who you want to work with, whether you know it or not. If you've got a show, or if you're thinking of making one, the first step into getting the right customers onto your podcast or into your audience is actually nailing your title. If it's vague, if it's an inside joke, if it's something that people aren't going to get and it's not, abundantly clear who the show is for, that's going to be an obstacle. The wrong people will show up as listeners and guests if you're not clear with who your podcast is for. If you do this right, though, and make a show for a niche, especially if that niche has deep pockets like we just described in that poll, it can benefit both of you tremendously. So your show title is your targeting. This is where your show becomes a watering hole for the ideal folks in the industry you want to work with. And I say watering hole because much like on the African savanna, everybody comes to the watering hole. The rhino, the lion, the tiny bird, the crocodile, he lives in it. All of these things for your industry, you should be looking to create this place where big and small customers, people who are in your industry, are drawn to your show by your title. We've got some examples of great titles on screen here, and this is how you ideally convert folks to customers after they guest on your show. I should mention, I normally work with folks who sell those higher ticket products or services, but you'll notice there's one in there called Smart Pizza Marketing. That guy knows his niche and he knows how to serve it. Now, he's not selling pizza with a podcast. He's helping the owners of restaurants with advice and marketing. That's something that's far more valuable than a $40 night out that you'll spend on delivery pizza, or night in, I should say, that you spend on delivery pizza. Also, when did pizza become $40? It was $20 when I was growing up. But either way, back on track. Let's look at how this works with a real example with some real numbers. Full disclosure on this. These numbers are big. And that's because it's a great real example. This is what happened. Podcasting works with products that aren't this expensive as well, but there is a minimum. So those of you who answered B and C in the poll, those are things to keep in mind as well. But there is a lower floor for the pricing on what your offer should be when you talk to folks on a podcast to attempt to encourage them to be your customer. We'll talk more about that shortly. So I want to tell you about a podcast called Innovative Legal Leadership. And that is a show that is designed for general counsels or GCs of Fortune 500 companies. And it's a fancy way of saying they're a big lawyer in charge of a big company legal department. Note the very direct title. Like I said, don't be overly clever with what it says on the can. And what it says on the can is actually a huge thing in podcasting because it tells your audience exactly who the show is for and who the new audience members of your show should be. Now, this show we were talking about, Innovative Legal Leadership, was sponsored by a legal tech company who knew that their product, a court case bidding software for corporate lawsuits, was something that needed sign-off from the highest levels of a company's legal department, either a GC or somebody who directly reported up to them. But in order to get in front of these customers, cold email wasn't working, cold calling wasn't working, the traditional advertising channels just wasn't happening. But what they did was they reached out to this GCs of over 130 household name companies. How? That's another webinar for later this year on guest booking. But let's say they all had a very talented, or they had a very talented business development rep who did this as part of his job and really crushed it at booking the guests that mattered. So, how did this show make $2 million in just under 3 years? Let's find out. So, they had conversations with the right people who could buy their product, but not by what talking about their product was at all, basically. It would come up occasionally, but it wasn't about how great their product was. These conversations primarily revolved around what the guest was doing that was hot and up and coming in the company that they were working at that they wanted to share with the rest of their industry, their innovative legal leadership. Helping your guests get exposure so that everyone in the industry knows what's going on at their company is huge. But the even more amazing thing, and this is where podcasting really sticks out and where you can really start to leverage your show, is that the one-on-one time with the host, who happened to be the CEO of the tech company, was winding up in those general counsels, making friends with him, like having dinner with him and all sorts of things like that down the line. So let's break down how valuable that time was, what they did, and how they kind of got around the expensiveness of a general counsel. The median Fortune 500 general counsel earns $3.4 million a year in total compensation. If you grind that down, it's about $1,600 an hour. I wish I made $1,600 an hour. I don't. My client was getting them on a podcast for free because the show was built exactly for that person, and they wanted to share what they were doing at their organization. It's probably one of the most expensive guest lists in history of B2B podcasting, excluding anything with billionaires or celebrities on it. And it costs them a microphone, some of their CEO's time, a great set of questions, and some post-production work with a partner agency. All in all, math together, it's about a 20x ROI. Awesome. But here's the number one thing I want you to learn about podcasting in 2026 for business. You can create incredible revenue from a handful of relationships. That $2 million, 3 deals. And they're on the screen right now. MasterCard, Prudential, AstraZeneca. All of them recurring revenue and all mid to high 6-figure deals when signed. If you want your business to make real deal money with a podcast, you have to have a product or service that is high ticket, or use it to leverage and create relationships that have at least a 5-figure value for you and your business. Courses that cost $99 aren't going to cut it. One of the biggest mistakes I see companies and organizations make when they're making a podcast is that they want to use it to sell directly to their consumer. Even if you're a university and you're selling an education, which is, a pricey product, a podcast is far better used as a strategic tool for donors and advancement rather than students. Why? Because your college has like 100 majors. You can't make a niche podcast on that. But what you can make a niche podcast on is the experience and love for your institution that your alumni have, that common thread niche. And it's a great way to make them open their wallets and support your institution, and is way more profitable than chasing admissions with a show. Now, even for myself, I have a smaller ticket product that I offer, which is a $500 base price. It shouldn't be sold with a podcast alone. Because number one, it takes a lot of $99 courses or $500 courses to make $2 million in revenue. But number two, podcasts should be used to build the big relationships, the things that would alter your business if you landed that contract. For some of you, 5Gs might be a business altering deal, but it's still generally not in the podcast as a sales and marketing tool territory. You're looking for that extra zero, that 5-figure number that changes your business, whether it's a sale or a relationship. And sometimes that latter one is more important than the former. This is the one key thing to take into account when using a podcast as a sales and marketing tool. The time, the money, and the energy. Is that investment worth it? When you're working with a software platform where you can charge folks a good amount a month for using that, yeah, likely yes. And I'm betting there are many of you here who are working with or working for a company that has a tool like that. A podcast is probably a great way to help sell that software, especially to harder to reach customers. The one thing that many folks in the podcast industry are reluctant to tell you is that not everyone should have a podcast for their business. In fact, If you sell to individuals, especially ones who are not high net worth, having a podcast might actually hurt your business rather than help it because it's siphoning off too many resources for not enough ROI. So we've seen this amazing scenario here. We've seen this works, real numbers, which is great. But here's the question you probably have right now. Why did it work? What went on here? Did we just invite a bunch of expensive lawyers and they, some of them bought? No. Here's where things get really interesting. And it's in the follow-up. So let's pretend you have a podcast and the financial piece checks out. You've got a product or service that has that cost, or you can obtain the relationship that brings you an equivalent return to that. Great example for this. If you're a wealth manager, you're looking for high net worth individuals. They may have that 5 or 6 figure relationship that you can squeeze out of a podcast, which is great. When you bring those folks onto your show, that's step 1. Getting to know each other, having a great conversation, making them look brilliant. The podcast episodes where everything starts, but the follow-up chain, which I'm going to show you in just a moment here, is where the ROI actually lives. Most hosts stop publishing after just a few episodes. The ones that keep it going, 10, 20, 50, 100 episodes later. It's this long tail that helps create the revenue opportunity for you. It's these relationships that you nurture over the years. And it's not necessarily because you're having those guests on repeatedly. You can do that, but it's all in the follow-up after you've had somebody on your show. So let's look at what works. After every episode I record for my own show, there's a sequence that kicks off. And I want to walk you through it because it's not complicated, but it's very intentional. And that's the difference between a podcast that generates business and one that just generates content. The first touch point, super simple one your mom taught you. A thank you note right after the recording. And in that note, I set an expectation. I say something along the lines of, hey, John, I really appreciated your time today on my show, B2B Business Class. I'll be back in touch in about 2 weeks when everything's put together and give you an air date for it. Nobody's mad about that when you let them know what's going on. That's not over communication. You're being professional. And again, you're making your mom happy because she taught you to write thank you notes when you were growing up. The second touch point is the pre-launch coordination, the sync. When the episode is ready to go, I reach out to folks via email and say, hey, let's sync up our social calendars to get some extra oomph out of this. Here's what I'm planning to post on launch day, the week after, everything like that. And I've got your social media calendar for the week here too. It's a great little way to take some lift off of your guest. They might not use it all, but you've just lightened up their content calendar for the next week or two and reminded them that you're a person who makes their life easier. Third one, launch day. A quick celebratory note. Your episode's live. Here's the link. Go listen. Thanks again for coming on. Keep it warm. Keep it moving. And here's the one most people skip. Actually go back later on and listen to your own show a few weeks later. Not just as a general listener, but like as a quarterback reviewing game tape of a football game. Because what that does is twofold. It helps you become a better host, and it helps you make a better show down the road. But more importantly, it gives you a real, genuine reason to reach out to your guest again. And this is where the difference comes. We're going to dig deeper on what is called the pitch pivot. So here's the moment I want you to hang on to from today. It's this pitch pivot. It's a series of touch points with this guest. You've stayed in contact. You've added value. Hopefully there's some sort of dialogue going with the email or social media coordinating that. You're being real, genuine, in a relationship with them. And now you're going back and listening and saying, after you listen to the conversation, you're listening for something that is a pain point for them. And when you find that pain point in that episode, and it's not going to be in everyone, you may have episodes where you don't have a pain point that the guest expresses to you, but because they are your ideal customer, they probably do. You should say something to them like, hey, I was going back through my episodes to sharpen my skills as a host, and I was listening to ours again. There was a moment where you mentioned whatever that issue is that you can help with. Is that still something you guys are working on? Because if it is, we should probably have a chat because it's something I can help with. Should we have a conversation? That's the pitch pivot right there. You've used the conversations you've already had, the ones where they told you about their business, their pain points, their current situations, to identify an opening. And now you're stepping into it not as a cold caller, not as somebody who dumps 1,000 emails out a day. You're stepping into it as someone who listened, had a great time with them, remembered something key about them, and sees an opportunity to help. And if that is a financial relationship for the two of you, that's the win. So the pitch pivot isn't a silver bullet, but it's the number one thing successful B2B podcasts do to engage their guests afterwards. And it's the thing that sealed every single one of those deals for innovative legal leadership. Identifying the decision maker, getting them into the guest seat, and making a relationship first that leads into a partnership with an ask at the right time. Now, here's the real fun part. Every one of those deals done without the use of AI. All human interaction and intelligence from the host and his team, and the genuine interaction with the general counsels in emails and in DMs on LinkedIn. Now, that's not to say that AI can't make this easier, and it does. But the human interaction is what sealed those deals and the presentation as a solution using the pitch pivot after it was established that the guest had a need for what my customer could offer. So let's talk about the AI aspect of this. Oops, I didn't go to this slide. My mistake. Sorry about that, guys. I'm going to let this sit here for just a moment so you can all take that in with the pitch pivot. And then we're going to move into this. So should you use AI for your podcast follow-up? This is a contentious one. And if you have angry outbursts about that, pop that in the chat. The poll is up there. Thank you so much, Kate. All right, a couple brave folks with the maybes. Folks saying no, that's good. All right. Waiting on about half a dozen more answers here, so think about that. We'll let this run for another 10 seconds or so. Get those answers in, folks. Very fun. All right. Kate, let's wrap that. Interesting. I love this, and those results should all be on your screen right now. I love this because you guys nailed it. You guys nailed it because this is double answer, and it's almost an even split between the two of them. It's B or C. Don't outsource your follow-up to AI for stuff like this. It's going to bite you in the backside. Instead, use automation and use AI to make your follow-up unavoidable from you as a human, but it needs your intervention. But you can also make sure that you can generate it quickly and take a look at it. So this slide has a lot of words on it, but we're going to go through it together. This is what you should have to do with your production workflow. Whatever your project management tool is, for us, it's Asana. There's plenty of other ones out there. Whatever you use, follow-up becomes a part of your show, whether it is a new show, an existing show, something that you are doing as a brand new venture. It's not an afterthought. It's not a separate project at the end of the day. The episode is complete when the follow-up is complete. It's a non-negotiable, and it's what will turn a number of recordings into an actual sales pipeline. The second part of this is that daisy chain I just showed you a few slides ago, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The thank you into the pre-launch, into the launch day, into the game tape review, inspiring the pitch pivot check-in, 5 touch points. None of them feel like a sales pitch until the last one. But even then, it's something that should be so softened by the aforementioned messages that it shouldn't feel yucky. Cold pitches feel yucky generally. This shouldn't. Have a way to make a custom landing page. This is part of my follow-up. I record a custom video. I love doing this for each episode that I make, and I use a platform called SalesReach. That's put out by a great guy. His name is Josh Feedy. His platform is generally designed for companies, but I make use of it as a small business here. But I record a custom video for each episode with each of my guests, and I make them a custom landing page with that personalized video embedded in it, a customized headline, a paragraph about our time together, and of course, direct links to where they can get the content that we've made from the time we spent together to make that social media promotion a heck of a lot easier on them. One of my recent guests actually she was so kind when she said this. She goes, Rob, this is a masterclass in follow-up. And I was like, oh, thank you, Aaron. It's worth a look to see how you can use a platform like that that fits you for the right size to level up your experience in following up with your guests. Now, we were talking about AI. Use templates, proofread it, tweak it, deeply customize it. You're the one who hits send. You're the human hand in the follow-up, and it's non-negotiable. An automated send is an automated delete. So this is how I advise folks to make your follow-up systematic to get people to build those relationships to you or with you when you're using a podcast, especially in a niche industry. The workflow we've talked about isn't just limited to the one follow-up, of course. After this point, we've got the 5 steps that I've just taught you here. This is where things take work. Sometimes deals, whether you are a small business or a software company or a big business or whatever it might be, sometimes those deals take time. And you might be emailing somebody and going back and forth and DMing them for 6 months, 9 months, a year. Relationships don't just pop up. But you're going to figure out as that relationship evolves and develops, when to have that next conversation, because you're a intelligent human being. You're a real person. We're not going to talk about any more of those signs today because we've given you enough of the first part here. But suffice to say, you're going to receive guidance from your prospects, your guests, in what they reply to your pitch pivots. So use those replies to determine the next steps and make sure that you note what those next steps are if they show a pattern for your business. So, to summarize, what actually closed those $2 million in sales for my customer with Innovative Legal Leadership? It was the relationship generated by the podcast appearance. It wasn't the, hey, we noticed you guys aren't on our platform and we can save you a whole bunch of money on your legal costs. It was, we'd like to get to know you first and see if this is something that can help you. Here's the thing. The episode recording session didn't just end with the host going to the guest, so are you ready to buy our software? No, far from it. The podcast was a catalyst for a real, true relationship. Again, like I said, dinners resulted from this before any business was discussed. A relationship with the host was the key piece to the puzzle, and it made a bridge to connecting to that guest down the line infinitely more accessible. They had been emailing and cold calling these folks for years in some cases, and the podcast kind of broke this open. I've always said that the getting a hold of a general counsel at a Fortune 500 company has to be like the impossible sales thing. You're probably facing like 50 secretaries as gatekeepers minimum. So to kind of skip to the end there is always an incredible thing to circumvent that and meet the person who can make the decision. So the time spent on familiarity is incredibly paramount for this. Keep in mind that all 3 of those Fortune 500 customers were on the lead list. Again, they were doing that work to email them, but it took booking the podcast conversation with the right person before those deals moved. 45 minutes with another person in a podcasting position is huge, and it opens the door for more receptiveness to future conversations because something does happen between that first conversation, even a pre-interview for a podcast, and the actual recording. People look forward to meeting somebody a second time. It's a very handy thing. And of course, as things progress down the line, that's how things evolve. So let's pause here for a moment. We have covered a ton, everything from pitch pivot to great things about what your show should be aiming for with your customer. I want to open this up to some Q&A here. I'm going to pull this slide down for a moment so I can see chat and everything like that. We've got some good questions in there. If you have questions that you haven't asked yet, I see there's a few in there already. Please pop those in there. I do want to start with Mr. Beckers here on the pre-launch sync. Do you have a framework or template for coordinating social calendars ahead of launch? Yes. Generally, I tell folks that I'm going to be posting on their episode 3 times, and I give them the dates and approximate times. Like morning, Monday, the 12th, afternoon, Wednesday, the 14th, and taking a look at how they can either pop themselves in, like, do they have anything, number one, that's going on at that point in time? But if they have existing stuff, how it fits in. So that's where I usually coordinate with them, as far as like, here's what I can provide for your calendar, but what are you doing right now is kind of the question I would tell people to ask as well in that, is as well. And I think that's a really good question, Ryan, to lead forward with that. Good deal. Anything else in there? Let's see. Any others? I'll give this another couple seconds here because some of you might be formulating an answer or a question here, which is great. But if not, we will move into the second half of this, which is great. Oh, excellent. From Annette here, you talk about how hard it is to access some leadership and focusing on strategic content, how to determine it. Yeah. The the strategic content is really an interesting thing, because when you get into some of these businesses that are larger, they have all these layers of defenses. And again, if you've ever cold called something, you know that um, it's not something that is it doesn't go with how, let me pause there for a second. Accessing leadership, sometimes you can, I don't want to say trick them because none of this is deceptive, but you can appeal to their desire to be on stage. That's where I think focusing on strategic content sometimes is a really good way to go with it. Sometimes you can make a content episode for somebody that is, hey, you are important in some way, shape, or form, not necessarily you're famous or whatever it might be, but you might be an industry expert. I want to feature you. And that may actually unlock other leadership opportunities to take a take a look at what you're doing with your podcast. I hope that answers things, and that give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or awesome, excellent. Then take one more here, Paul. I want to take yours at the end here when we have a little bit more time here. Diane, taking because I have the answer to this one. Diane, how getting guests? We will be talking a little bit about that here at the end. I do want to let you know. I think what I'm going to have my team do is send the link to the March webinar, because we talked about some of my guest framework and things like that in there to get guests for your show. In a 10-second nutshell here, though, I propose folks do what I call a 2 a day. You get a list of your ideal customers or clients, and you email 2 of them every day. Pick 2 and say, hey, I would love to see if you're interested in coming on this show. Here's the thing, though. That pitch has to be under 150 words, and you should not be ultra verbose about it. You should say one, if not maybe 2. 1 is probably the best way. Hey, you are so-and-so. We are XYZ show. Would love to see if you're interested in coming on because reason. Get in, get out. If you do this 2 times a day, against 2 little emails a day, 5 days a week, I guarantee you will never be hurting for guests. The only challenging thing about that is determining who you are emailing at first. But if you have a lead list or things like that, that can be a very good way to alleviate that. So great stuff here. Kate, if you can help me remember to answer Paul's question about developing the niche you want to serve, that would be great. We're going to answer that at the end, because that is a question I could spend quite a bit of time on. So we're going to pick back up here on the next segment where, yeah, and we thank you for such great questions, I should say, as well. We're going to revisit some of these topics down the line. The fun part about QA is it gives me things to talk about for next time. If you are enjoying this so far, we do this kind of webinar every third full week of the month, so it doesn't run into any holidays or anything like that. It's always a Wednesday at 1 Eastern. We'd love to see you back for those. We'll be sending some invites and things like that for that via email in the future. The next section is building on the first, and this is going to get into some of the questions that were asked here about guesting and being a guest, but also finding guests a little bit. Maybe not as direct as like the two a day method I gave, but that is definitely something to take a look at here. So building something people remember and come back to. The most memorable voices in any medium aren't saying something new every time. They're saying the same core things in new contexts with new depth. they're not repeating themselves. They're actually teaching a curriculum. For example, some of you here were here last month, which was great. And I'm so glad you're back. I'm betting you heard a few things today that you remember from last time. I mean, we even just referenced things from March a moment ago. And hopefully that helps to continue to reinforce your understanding of how to use a podcast as a sales and marketing tool and gives you context to what we're talking about today and next time and things like that, rather than coming across as like cheap filler and repetition. I want to look more closely at how you as a host and as a guest can make a more coherent show or a guest appearance. So let's rewind, sands of time, about 10 years ago when I was at my last corporate job. I was a big Gary Vaynerchuk fan for a long, long time. That mid 2010s era until about 2019 or so. That was really where I was just eating up everything that Gary did. I've outgrown a lot of that, and that's fine. But here's what I think Gary did that is worth studying, regardless of whether you feel that he's great or the opposite of great. Every time I heard Gary Vee talk or watch one of his videos, it was the same core ideas: patience, volume, long game, relationship values, content waterfalls. Those themes showed up whether he was on a podcast, doing a keynote, filming a video in the back of an Uber ride. The context of those videos changed constantly, but the core messaging almost never did. And that's not a lack of creativity on Gary's part. That's his strategy. He built something super recognizable. You knew within seconds when you saw his video that it was a Gary Vee. And that recognition, that familiarity, and sometimes bluntness from Gary was what made people come back. I know it's what worked for me. You need to build that, not by copying Gary's style. Don't do that. One Gary in the world is enough. But by developing your own version of it and your own 3 or 4 ideas that you return to across every guest appearance, every episode you produce of your own show, every webinar in this case. So let me use myself as an example because I think it's a little bit more useful than being abstract about Gary Vee. I have a number of concepts that I come back to constantly. One is called guest ELO. We're going to visit that in a minute. Another one's called play the dive bars. That's coming up too. And hey, we just heard the pitch pivot, and there's 1 or 2 coming up in the few months here that we haven't introduced yet. The first time I talked about guest ELO was at the Badass Business Summit in fall of 2025. Some of you were there. And what I said about it there and what I'm saying about it here are the same concept, but this version has 8 months more refinement in it. And the version I talk about next year will be even better. The entire reason that these webinars exist is because somebody told me I needed to expand on what I was saying back then and continue to educate people on the curriculum that I didn't even know I had developed. That's how you build something that people come back to. You don't start over every time. You go deeper. And so we're going to be talking about those concepts that we did earlier today, next month and the month after, but not in the depth that we did today, but to support and frame other topics that I use as a part of my content stack. So using this model for your own content stack is what I'd like you to develop today. So we're going to take a quick look here. And again, taking a look at the theme and variation for building your curriculum. For you hosts, your recurring conceptual anchors are what are going to give listeners a reason to come back to you specifically, not just to your podcast in general. Your show has a theme, and it should strive to be a watering hole for your ideal customer, who should also be your ideal listener and ideal guest. To touch on Paul's question here, you have to figure out for your business with a niche, what is the one thing you do that is high value, that differentiates you from everybody, that you can have people in to be an expert on for your niche industry. When you go out into the world of guesting and social media, you need to take those concepts with you, because your podcast will eventually become kind of a part of your content stack. Now, LinkedIn's new algorithm actually encourages this, which is kind of cool. So if you make your podcast and its surrounding ecosystem, website, social media, all a part of what you're developing to bring things to the table at all times, people are going to start finding this. So you need to make sure that your efforts are focused around a few key niches that you can work to dominate in your industry. You'll want to develop probably 3 or 4 of those. I know that I'm developing, I believe, 4 at this point in time. So as we take a look at this, I want to do another quick poll here, which is because polls are fun. Uh, Katie, if you get that up, we're going to be intentional about which rooms we step into, but I need to go backwards on that. Sorry about that. There's one last poll here. How many people are actively pitching any interview-based podcast at a given time? Is it 12? Is it 21, 42, or 53? If an interview-based podcast is being pitched by guests, how many people are actively doing that right now for the average interview show? Got a couple responses out there. 42 is pulling ahead. We'll let this run for another 10 or 15 seconds. All right, all right. Looks like that's slowing down a little bit. I am super, okay, oh, that just changed a little bit more. Cool. I am super happy to see that some of you have nailed it, which is fantastic. The average interview podcast has, and we can close that down, Kate, has 42 people actively pitching to it at any given moment. So it is hard to get booked on podcasts, and there's a mismatch there. I talked about this back in March. The average interview podcast has a busload of people waiting in line to try to get on it. If you're a guest, your stories need to be prepped, owned, and refined across appearances. But that sounds like a catch-22. How do I get stories prepped if I don't have things on the front there? The first time you tell a story is in your pitch. And don't use the pitch to figure out what your story is. That's for sure. You have to practice these before even going to an initial level podcast. If you stand out in the pitch, that's going to be your key in the door. Folks are going to sniff out stories that are too rough. Put some polish on these to be a better guest and be something that people are going to say, oh, his stuff or her stuff sounds really interesting. AI is great at this because it can help you organize and develop your ideas. It's a huge help, but remember, the ideas have to be yours. My concepts of guest ELO didn't come from a prompt. It came from me being a video gamer. My concept of play the dive bars didn't come from a template that Claude generated. It's a phrase my mom used when I was practicing my piano as a kid. Both of those are from my inner experience and inner reflection. AI for guesting is a helper, not a replacement, especially in the day and age when people are scrambling to find authenticity. Something you can use AI for is as a story coach, but take that with a grain of salt. AI will help you refine things, tighten up your phrasing, make things punchier, but it'll also take the human edge out of it. Always reprocess what AI gives you for a story to add the humanity back in. Your show and your appearances as a guest should be 100% distinctly you. When you bring that uniqueness into your appearances and a personality that really resonates with people, guesting gets easier. Taking the time to do your research on shows, be on the right stages for your level, especially if you're starting out, and this goes both ways for guests and for hosts, you have to make sure that if you're a guest, you're appearing on smaller shows to start with. Or if you're a host, you're not shooting for big name, important guests. Those guys don't bring audiences. They've got their own stuff. They're not going to play your tiny stage, if you will. I've been guesting on podcasts for more than half a decade, and I still enjoy the smaller venues because they oftentimes lead to bigger ones. So we are going to, I left that up too far. Oh, good. There we go. We're going to move into being intentional about this with what's called the guest ELO. That not every mic is the right mic to step up to. Where you show up shapes how people perceive you, for better or worse. This is a section about playing where you can win and knowing what that actually means. Here is an honest example from my own experience. General marketing podcasts, I'm a little iffy on those. I know podcasting, I know B2B content strategy, but a broad-based marketing show where the host wants to go deep on paid media or brand architecture, that's a show that I likely won't take as a guest. I won't go guest on that because that's not where I know I can win. But a show about B2B podcasting or strategy, or a show where the audience is made up of the exact types of business owners and operators that I work with, that's where I can show up and add real value. And that's where I look competent, not out of my element, if you will. So the same thing applies to podcast guesting. If you look at the PowerPoint right now, we've got 5 levels of shows here. And of course, they're all musical because they're all based off of that phrase that my mother told me when I was a kid. You've got to play a lot of dive bars before you play Carnegie Hall, kid, as I was practicing my piano. You have the dive bars, you have the indie venues, the regional stages, the national tours, and of course, Carnegie Hall. If a national tour show approached me and came calling tomorrow, I could do it, but I would prepare way differently than I would for a 500 listener niche show. It's a big stage. One bad appearance is going to follow you. Play where you can win, and be honest with your own skill level as a prospective guest, even if you host your own show. If you've been on 3 podcasts, don't pitch yourself for something like How I Built It or some other giant show in Apple. You don't belong there. Being intentional about the rooms that you're going in isn't just about avoiding ones where you'd be overmatched. It's also about finding the ones where you're an expert in the room. For your business, what's the specific intersection of the topic, audience, and format where you show up and own the room? And this is a great thing that you can flip on its head for guests as well. I know there was some asking about that for the guests, is the intersection of finding guests that have an expertise that fits your level and that fits your format. That's going to be, and again, that's a generalism here. That's going to be something to take a look at. Find those shows that either you're guesting on or you would like guests from, in this case, on a podcast search engine called Listen Notes. Listen Notes will allow you to not only search by show, but also search by episodes. When you're the host, you can make sure that the guests that you bring on are the right level for your show as well, because not only does Listen Notes allow you to take a look at, what the catalog of podcasts is, but it will sort by guests and sort by everybody who has been a guest on that show, which is great. Taking a look at this slide, there are so many places that you could get started, but don't get a jump on trying to play above where you belong. Hosting, guesting, being a host that is a guest, everything comes down to how people perceive you and the relationships that you have with them. To bring this all the way back around, sometimes your guests will have shows. If you are searching for guests for your show, consider doing a guest exchange. You're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It's a great way to tag team promotion, content creation, things like that. Asking your guests if they have their own show, if you want to do something like that, that's a great solution. But also the other thing is ask your past guests who they know that might make a great current guest. Ask them for 2 names. And that takes a little bit of email and things like that, but you're already emailing them with that follow-up of the pitch pivot. So add that as a topic as well. At the end of the day, whether you have your own show or are looking to guest on others, you have to know your lane and stay in it until you've earned your stripes to move up and move forward. Get those receipts. We're going to bring this together quickly as we wind up with, kind of our last bit here, where we're going to dedicate some more time to the questions and whatnot. Let's bring it back together. 1, your message is your targeting. If your show's title doesn't tell the right person that they belong there, you're going to spend a lot of time and energy bringing people into the wrong room. Get specific. Get focused. Find a niche audience that is going to give you the opportunity to meet the people who can move the needle on revenue for you. Number 2, the episode is just the opening move. The pitch pivot lives in the follow-up, which is still part of the episode. You have to build that chain. Stay in contact with people. Go back and listen to your own show. Folks will be delighted to hear that you took the time to analyze your conversation with them and send that message with the pitch pivot. Find that pain point. Oftentimes, it's not 100% apparent at the top, but you can infer from your conversations with your guests on what may be a pain point for them. That's how a podcast becomes a pipeline. Number 3, build something people come back to. As a host and as a guest, there are folks who follow guests around podcasting circuits and things like that. If you see somebody like, I don't know, I'm going to just go back to Gary Vee. If you see Gary Vee on a podcast, you're probably, if you like him, you're probably going to go listen to it because you like Gary Vee. You want to build 3 to 5 signature concepts deepened over time, exclusively for the audience that you serve and made to be distinctly yours. It's great for guesting. It's also great for hosting and great for developing your podcast niche premise as well. Last but not least, number 4, not every mic is the right mic. You can take any podcast invitation. I actually had a contact of mine to reach out to me last night. I'm going to be doing a big video on this later on. He got pitched by a guy to be on his podcast, and the dude hadn't made an episode in 8 years. The host who was pitching him hadn't made an episode in 8 years, and that was really unusual. Not every mic is the right mic, and that one seemed a little scammy, but play where you can win. Know your lane. Show up in rooms where you're the expert, not the student. As you grow, as you level up, do it intentionally. And I will tell you, I enjoy playing the lower level venues myself much more than the higher level venues because I feel like the relationships are far more genuine. All right. I want to thank everybody for being here today. That's going to wrap the official presentation bit here. This room keeps getting sharper every month. We've had a lot of great folks stick around here, which is fantastic. And I want to thank you for being here. And it's pushed me to build more and better things. So in that spirit, go build something that people are going to remember. And if I can help with any of it, you guys, you might be getting an email from me, might just have that, which is great. A few things before you go. This replay is going to be sent to you via YouTube, a YouTube link as soon as we have that all uploaded and taken care of. It's probably going to happen tomorrow afternoon, as I'm guessing. Additionally, each of you will be receiving a link to enroll in the first 2 modules of our podcast pitch lab. For those of you that are looking to either guest on shows or want sort of the behind the scenes of how to fill your guest pipeline, definitely something to take a look at and take advantage of. Those will be emailed to you at no charge. And of course, if you want that full course, there is a code that Kate will be putting in the chat here. It is dive bars 0426 because you should always play the dive bars. That'll help save you some scratch at checkout as a course, as of course, for being here today. And then last but not least, there may be some of you running podcasts for your company that are searching for more ways to see how you can make an impact with your show and show your leadership what that does in making high impact relationships. I know a number of you have already done so, but if you haven't, there is a chat link that is going to be in the chat there that'll book a meeting with me, give you 30 minutes of my time, and we can talk all about podcasting, which will be just a fantastic thing. And any additional advice I can provide, or hey, if working together makes sense, we can take a look at that too.